3, 2, 1.
What's up, everyone? Dan here, Crypto Capital Venture, August 8th, 2018. I hope you're doing well. Bitcoin's down. I'm going to make this video short and sweet and valuable to you in terms of anticipating what's going on and what might happen next. So we're going to talk about a possible inverse head and shoulders on the weekly. If that breaks, what to anticipate. Obviously, we're talking about the downside a little bit here, but we should because there's been some momentum on the downside, hasn't there? So before we jump in, appreciate all of you in the comments. Appreciate all of you coming by. Even if you're one of those grumpy commenters, we're in this together. Appreciate your optimism, your outlook in this technology, whether it's monetary outlook or technological. Appreciate it. It's definitely motivating to me to see all of you still in the game. So let's jump into Bitcoin. Let's look at it. We're on the weekly. So especially if you've been following me on Twitter, I believe I've been talking about this originally on Twitter, this possible inverse head and shoulders forming since February, right? On the weekly. A weekly inverse head and shoulders can be extremely powerful bottom in this downtrend that we've been in. So something to look out for. Not saying it's going to happen, but right now, as of today, it's in play. So you can see, is it in formation? Here's the left shoulder, here's the head, and here's a possible right shoulder, which we started spotting from the top right around $8,100 in a video last week. So obviously down a good amount since then, but now it's time to find a bounce. It's time to find a bottom in this right shoulder. So let's see if that happens. If it doesn't happen, we can kind of erase that reverse head and shoulders, right? And we can look at this continued downtrend. We can see this falling wedge on the weekly, basically, where we see these lower highs and we see these lower lows happening. So we can anticipate a new lower low for Bitcoin. The main thing I want to talk about besides the inverse head and shoulders in this video is really this very interesting area of, I guess you could call it, sentiment confluence, because a lot is happening with this possible ETF announcement. A lot has happened already, being it's been postponed, right, to September. But leading into September, that emotional aspect, that sentiment aspect is playing a huge role in terms of manipulation, in terms of how you all are feeling and we're all feeling and investing, right? So we're at this very critical time where people are just like, should I accumulate here or are we going lower? And that's kind of the question everybody's wondering. And there is no exact answer. It's personal. You have to make your own unique decision in regards to that question. But we can look at the charts for some clues into what to anticipate. So if we do see new lows, if we don't get a bounce here, and we'll jump into the daily in a second, if we don't get a bounce here on the weekly to have an uptrend back through and up possibly that upper trend line, what can we anticipate on the downside? Well, we can anticipate a new low, which would obviously be breaking this previous low. Let me get my brush, this previous low here. So we can anticipate a move further down, probably right to the bottom of that trend line. So right now we're on the weekly right around 6,200. So the bottom of that trend line is another 20%, right? And that brings us right into that $5,000 area, which many are calling for support. For months, we've been talking about a possible long-term bottom for Bitcoin in the $3,000 to $5,000 range. That has always been a huge accumulation buy zone for me personally. That's not financial advice. So if we do break this previous low, if we don't get this inverse head and shoulders on the weekly, we can anticipate, that $5,000 range as that next low and a possible bounce off there. So we talked about this ETF news, and that's right here in September. You can see right over here in September, that can play a huge role in terms of a bounce, a possible bounce off of this trend line, right? So things can look very bleak. We could get very positive news on this ETF, and that can be a huge bounce to approach this trend line, this upper trend line, and start maybe making a run in terms of a bull run. So let's jump over to the daily. One thing I want to point out, because we talked about it, I think yesterday's video, this Fibonacci retracement to the 786 right there. You can see we were looking for support right here at the 786, right? This very important channel. Well, we broke it. We broke support. We've gone through it. It's something to point out. It's not that we miscalculated anything, but we were looking for a bounce off of there so we can anticipate maybe 10%, 15% gains from that area. but we broke it. So now it's kind of like, what do we do now, especially in terms of on the daily, because we just looked at that inverse head and shoulders on the weekly. So what we can do is pretty simple. We can go to our momentum oscillators to really get some clues. And this is what I like to do when really things are very unknown, because at this very unknown, overextended, oversold area, this is when you really start anticipating accumulation. This is when I start anyway. So right now you can see we've been in this oversold, very oversold area since like August 2nd, right? So right now it's August 8th. That's 6 days down here. And if you look at previous historical data, we haven't hung out in that oversold area for that long very often. And maybe we were oversold for a while, but we had these mini bounces up, right? Even if it's a 5-10% gain. So right now, in terms of traders, I bet you there are many traders, and I'm not trading Bitcoin right now, but many traders that are maybe starting to enter or look to enter trading positions for a nice 10% bounce, which is something to anticipate right now in terms of Bitcoin. So in terms of accumulation, right? Should you accumulate? I said earlier in the video, that is completely 100% up to you. Nobody knows what's going to happen next. Somebody commented and asked me, Dan, should I buy? It was on our Launchpad social network page. Is now the time to accumulate? And I said, well, if we go lower, 25% lower, and you accumulated now, will you be okay with your decision that you just bought? That's the main question. That's the main thing that we do when we do these videos. We ask that question. In the worst scenario, are you okay if you made this decision now? And that's the best we can do because nobody knows the future. But we can really protect our portfolio by asking those tough questions. So that's the daily. And then lastly, we can check out the weekly right now. One thing I do want to point out in terms of this downward momentum, you can see this 4-hour candle with this nice long wick. So we had some obvious, not some, we've had a good amount of daily pressure, right? And you can see it illustrated on these 4-hour candles, this momentum down. But right now you see this 4-hour current candle that we're in. We see a nice long wick, which is showing a little bit of upward pressure. Maybe the bears are getting tired at this moment, because if we measure right now from that previous top to where we are, 25% down. So right now, are the bears getting tired? It's a good thing to look out for on the 4-hour, and we might see some bulls step in. We might see some volume step in, and especially in terms of those traders, right, that might be entering some shorter term positions. And then on the 4-hour, the other thing just to keep in mind is if we do get a bounce here, we can start keeping an eye on that weekly inverse head and shoulders, so we can tie it all back around even on the shorter time frames. So that weekly inverse head and shoulders, here's that neckline right there, that purple neckline. And then from there, if we do get upward momentum, right now we are currently around 28% from that neckline. So we would need a nice run to even talk about an actual formation and a confirmation of that inverse head and shoulders, but it's there. And we all know how quick things can turn in this market, so it's something to anticipate on the upside. If we do approach that neckline, what would a target look like for a break above and through that neckline? Target would be the bottom of the head on this weekly inverse head and shoulders, right? It would be the bottom of the head to the neckline, that distance. So right now, that distance would take us all the way up to around $11,000, a little over $11,000. That would be a price target on a bullish run. And that would lead us right to break these previous highs, right around $10,000. So completely in play. We know this game. We know cryptocurrency is all over the place. So on the upside, I did want to touch base on potential gains that could be in play, but I'll end it here on the weekly. Please be aware. Please be very aware of this area, which is this $5,000 area, the bottom of this trend line. If we break these lows, if this downward momentum continues, but off of this area, I would think, this is my opinion, that we might get a nice little bounce, even if it's for temporary lower highs, right? But a nice bounce nonetheless, even to the top of that trend line would be 40% or so gains. And we'll see. And the ETF news in September has a lot to do with this story, and there it is. There's the box on the screen. You see it. Time will tell. We will see. I hope you got some value out of this video. Please let me know what you're doing out there, because there's a lot of chatter. A lot of people asking, what should I do? Accumulate? Should I wait? Do you think it's going down more? Let me know. Are you accumulating now? Are you averaging down now and, moving forward if we do see new lows? Let me know. I'm curious. Really appreciate you coming by. As always, I will see you in the next video, and God bless.